Okay, we are in the Amida Sutra. We finished talking about Anathapindika, chỉ cư tú长者, trưởng giả cấp cô độc. Now we will talk about the second person in the sutra is the elder Sariputra, trưởng lão Xá Lợi Phất, Sơ Ly Phổ,尊者. So we will talk about his life. We will talk about what we can learn from his life to be able to apply in our lives so we can benefit from the learning of the Dharma. So I took this from the life of Sariputra, trưởng lão Xá Lợi Phất, Sơ Ly Phổ尊者. So this is a typical painting or a typical sculpture of the Buddha in the middle and Sariputra, Xá Lợi Phất, Sơ Ly Phổ on the right-hand side, and Moggallana, 大目犍连, Đại Mục Kiền Liên on the left-hand side. So today we will focus on Sariputra, Sơ Ly Phổ, Xá Lợi Phất, about his life. So these two were the great disciples of the Buddha, and they are greatly venerated, especially in the Nanchuan, Namjuying Phật giáo, in the Theraveda lands. This is a stupa in Sanchi in India where the relics, Sơ Ly, Xá Lợi, of Sariputra and Moggallana, this is where they put the relics to worship the two great disciples for their contributions. So these two great disciples have the highest in veneration of Buddhists in the Theravada lands. 南传佛教, Nam Juying Phật giáo. Few religious teachers have been so well served by their immediate disciples as the Buddha. In Tripitaka, Sanzang Jing Lü Lun, Tam Tạng Kinh Lực Luận, there is no such connected accounts of the life of Sariputra. So they had to pull from different pieces from different areas to put together the life of Sariputra. They were all scattered over, but they had different explanations to help us understand about the characters of Sariputra, Sơ Ly Phổ, Xá Lợi Phất. He was regarded as a skilled preceptor, an exemplar, a kind and considerate friend. And we'll see how that is. A guardian of the welfare of the bhikkhus, Bichu, Tỳ Kheo, and faithful repository of the Master's doctrine, Master's Ru Lai Như Lai. So he was regarded as supreme in wisdom compared to other disciples. So 智慧第一, trí tuệ đệ nhất. So we can get into his life now. So today we will discuss about the life of Venerable Sariputra, Sơ Ly Phổ, Xá Lợi Phất, as the chief disciple of the Buddha, 大弟子, right, Đại đệ tử, known for his foremost in wisdom. So 佛陀的大弟子舍利佛尊者智慧第一, Đại đệ tử của Phật, tôn giả Xá Lợi Phất, trí tuệ đệ nhất. The story goes that in the villages in India, there were two Brahmanical families that gave birth to two children at the same time, and they were called the two children were called Opatissa and Kolita. Opatissa later on he became known as Sariputra, and Kolita later on known as Moggallana. So Sari was the mother of Opatissa, and he took on his mother's name essentially. And the same thing with his the other friend, Kolita. His name was called Magali. So they were very close friends for 7 generations. So very close relationship. And both women gave birth to the two boys at the same day. And they were named as such, Patisa and Magali. So when they were growing up, they were very well educated, and they acquired mastery of all sciences. So, and because they came from rich families, they had 500 Brahmin youth, following them, in a way serving them, so to serve them. They wherever they went in palanquins. So these are the palanquins where they didn't have to walk. So they had servants carrying them around. So they came from wealthy family. At that time, there was an annual event called Hilltop Festival. And the boys were very excited, and a lot of people were very excited, and because they get to witness celebrations. There were a lot of laughters, a lot of fun, entertainment, and so they even pay extra for following days to be part of the celebration. So the first day was very fun. The second day was very fun, but then on the third day, they realized that the fun was no longer there. It was not as exciting as the first 2 days. So they were no longer laughing. They were no longer excited about they were no longer entertained from all the activities. And so they had the same thought. They look at each other and they say, "What's going on here? I don't feel as fun as before." And his friend says, "I feel the same way. It's not as fun as before." And then they realize, even though at young age, they start to realize that before these people have reached 100 years, they will have to come to death. What we are to do is to seek for a teachers for deliverance, 解脱, 解脱. They observe life in a very deep way compared to many people. So today I want to focus on this part here because this is very important. When the two boys were looking for deliverance, 解脱, 解脱, they looked that, yes, people have fun, but at the end, they're going to have to die. So this may sound very pessimistic, right, to be thinking about death and wanting to leave this world. But this is not meant to be morbid. This is not meant to be sad. This is not meant to be negative. But it should be understood properly in order to gain benefits. So let's look into the meaning behind these words from a Buddhist perspective to try to understand the mindset of these two young men. So today's lecture, as I was preparing for this lecture in my notes, I realized that it might be a little bit difficult to understand. And I will try my best to summarize its sections so that you can follow. So I'm trying to build a very strong case here, from earth to heaven, in today's talk, to illustrate why these men felt discontented. They wanted to leave this world, but they were not sad. But so I'm trying to build a case as to why this is a positive thing and not a negative thing. Okay. So people developed at different paces, but generally there are 4 types of development: biological, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. People go through all these 4 development phases, but no in particular order. Sometimes they occur together concurrently. Sometimes they occur serially, one after another. When a person is developed physically, we can say that the body becomes stronger, right? And becomes more independent, meaning less reliance on external factors because the body is stronger now. For example, when a baby relies on the care of his mother for survival, because the baby cannot take care of itself. So as he grows older to become an adult, he can begin to take care of himself and is able to find his own shelter and food. So in this way, we say he is more independent. He becomes less reliant on others for support. So we can say that this person has grown up physically. So that's one example of biological development. As he grows up, he may get hurt emotionally by what other people say to him or do to him. And as he learns how to deal with how people treat him, he becomes more emotionally strong. Right? So he has now grown emotionally. Right? You're following me, right? So that's another phase of growth is emotional development. to be strong emotionally. By understanding that he doesn't have to let other people's treatments influence him, he learns how to grow emotionally. He learns that he can decide to be happy on his own. When he becomes less reliant on others for happiness, he becomes more emotionally strong and independent. Right? You're following me, right? So we may think that we are strong and independent, but in reality, we are still very much dependent on other people. In this world, we think we're strong, but in reality, we're not. For example, you look at the Chinese character human, 人, nhân. You can see that this character here consists of 2 strokes, right? 2 strokes. What this represents is that one rests on the other. So that's humans, it's resting on somebody else. So we as humans, in order we take on the human form, it's because we need other people. Because without this supporting this, it will fall. And without this pushing back, this one will fall as well. So the two have to come together in order to develop, to grow. That is human. So in order for us to sustain and to grow, we need to rely on each other. So as long as we are humans in this world, we will continue to rely on each other. So in this way, we are not so independent. We may think we are independent, but in actuality, we are not. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we are powerless. In fact, we are empowered to help other people. This is us resting on this stroke, right? But this stroke here is also us too. We are pushing, supporting. So we are supporting one another. We are relying on one another. That's human, right? That's humanity. We rely on each other. We support each other. So we might not be completely independent, but we are empowered to support one another, to support each other, right? That's part of growth, because if we take that away, meaning that our reliance on other, then we are not growing. When we are not supporting other people, we are not growing as humans. Right? So you look at this illustration here a little bit. This is a brief description of human development. So growing up biologically, emotionally, right, intellectually, and spiritually. So you can see at the top left here, a toddler, a little baby, an infant, is having fun playing with its toy. Right? As kids, it's enjoy playing with toys. When this toddler grows older, now he's having fun playing with friends, running around. He's no longer interested in toys anymore, this little toys, but he's interested in running around, so he has grown. His personality has grown, meaning that he has left his old toys behind, and now he's pursuing something more suitable, like finding friends, running around with friends. As he grows older, now he's starting to find fun in playing games with older friends. Right? So as teenagers, they like to hang around, and that's how they have fun. They don't play with toys anymore, but they may not be running around anymore, but they are now playing with games. And as they grow older, and I know that some adults do play games too, but that's a different matter. But traditionally, you look at this picture here, as we grow older, we leave the games behind, and now we find fun in engaging in conversations with other adults. So and stimulating conversations, that's what motivates us. And then as we grow older, then we start to enjoy each other's company in a more quiet setting, right? Just having, for example, as opposed to going to partying, as opposed to go to nightclubs, You can just have fun by having a quiet breakfast with your friends, right? In a very quiet coffee shop. So in this way, you can have just as much fun. You don't need the toys anymore. You don't need the games anymore. In fact, you have to leave your toys behind. You have to leave games behind. You have to leave all the stimulating conversation, all the excitement behind. But now you find joy in a very quiet setting. So you have grown. In other words, you have developed yourself through this stage. So as a person becomes even more emotionally or intellectually mature, then they can enjoy their time being by themselves, doing their own thing. So this is a picture here to show how we can just be ourselves and be happy about it. That means that we have grown emotionally, intellectually. We don't have to rely on each other, on other people as much. So when you are have developed, that means you rely less and less, right? So the next phase of development is spiritual growth. So here we have a nun in meditative bliss. She's sitting in meditation, completely absorbed in her own world without fear. This is not to say that the only way to have spiritual development is to become a nun or a monk, but this is just an illustration. The illustration here is that the ultimate, the next step in development is spiritual growth. You cannot go any higher. You can grow up as an adult, but that doesn't mean that you have grown up emotionally, because there are people who might have grown up physically, but yet they are emotionally immature. For instance, they act childlessly right in front of their spouse, and if they don't get what they want, they get upset. So that is an immature person, a person who has not really grown up. He had just grown up physically, but not emotionally. But there are those they may still be children physically, but they are highly spiritually developed, such as examples in the Dhammapada, 法句经跟法鼓. We see 7-year-old children attaining arhatship, arahant, becoming arhat. So they achieve complete freedom from all psychological conditionings. So even though they were very young age, but they had grown spiritually, right? So these 4 development phases don't go together one by one. People grow at different phases. There are people who have developed emotionally and intellectually. They know a lot. They have even a PhD, but yet they refuse to develop spiritually. They think that religion is superstition. If it cannot be sensed by the body or proven by science, then it's not real. So they have limitation. They refuse to grow spiritually, right? So the point I'm trying to convey here is that in order for development to take place, one will have to leave behind one's current state and be motivated to move on to the next state. Just like the toddler has to give up its toy in order to make friends. And it will have to give up all the games in order to find meaningful conversations. Sometimes you have to leave your friends behind in order to find your inner peace, your true peace. Sometimes you have to be alone in order to find your inner peace. Because when you are with your friends, you are being distracted. The fun that you have is not because of you, but because of your friends of the company. So to find out whether you are a happy person or not, the best way is to be alone, to see if can you still be happy being yourself. If you're being alone and you're not happy, then you know that your joy, your happiness is being borrowed, right? You're borrowing your happiness from somebody else, right? And then when you are completely absorbed in meditation in your own world, you don't need music. You may be alone, but you need to have music. You need to have good food. You have to need all the accommodations. Then you're still relying on the outside environment. But if if you can still be happy sitting there for an hour, then you know that your happiness is pretty much yours, that you have developed it, is your own. You're not borrowing it from anybody. Some people can't even sit still for 5 minutes, right? But if you can sit for an hour, then you know that, hey, that happiness that you have, you can pretty much say it's yours, right? So it's a good way to test how developed are we? How strong are we emotionally, right? Intellectually, spiritually. Right? So these are the different phases that people go through, and so this helps us to understand where we are and where else we can go. And the reason that one is willing to move on is because one recognizes that the current state is no longer meeting their needs. For example, we are willing to let go of our toys because the toys are no longer meeting their needs. We no longer have fun with the toys. That's why we reach out to our friends. But after a while, you see that all the partying, all the drinking is no longer meeting our needs. And so we just leave them behind. And so we turn more towards spirituality. And we realize that sitting in meditation is actually can give us more joy than drinking and partying. So in order for us to enjoy meditative bliss, we will have to give up all the other things that will distract us or will be in the way, right? So what I'm trying to say here is we are motivated towards spirituality, towards meditation, 督涵, 修行, it's because we see that the world is no longer able to deliver, to meet our needs. Our needs are now something else. When we were young, right, our needs is to have fun with toy, and that's all you can give. Right now, parents, how do they babysit parents? They give kids what? iPads, right? So iPad is meeting the needs of the children. They're happy. But after a while, they find out that iPad's no longer meeting the needs. Now they need an iPhone to talk to their friends. They need a car, they need clothes. So they find out that whatever is not meeting the needs, they leave, right? Just like us. Things that no longer meeting our needs, we have to move on. That's the only way for us to continue to seek things that will meet our needs. Okay, right? So you're following me, right? Okay. So the two friends, Upatissa and Magali, Xá Lợi Phất, Mục Kiền Liên, Salifu, and Mu Jianlian, these two friends here, they were experiencing spiritual development. Therefore, they didn't think that the world was able to meet their needs any longer. That's why they did not see the joy in the entertainment, the festivals. It's not that they became depressed, right? They did not become depressed, but they felt that the entertainment of the festival was no longer meeting their needs. It was fun and entertaining, but now no longer. We all have experienced physical, emotional, and intellectual growth, right? We are now adults. We've gone through school. We've been through relationships, so we know how to grow, right? Physically, emotionally, and intellectually. But what about spiritual growth, spiritual development? Not many people have experienced spiritual development. So what is spiritual development, and what is it like to go through spiritual development? And this is very important because if we don't get to spiritual development, we are not growing. We may be very intellectual. We have a lot of degrees. We have a lot of education, but we refuse to accept something that cannot be proven by science. So we are limiting ourselves, right? So of emotion, physically, emotionally, intellectually, we can grow. But if we don't grow spiritually, we are forever limited, right? So what is that spiritual development so that we can continue to grow? What is it like to be experiencing spiritual growth? Spiritual growth is taking one's independence to another level. Specifically, there are three areas. The spiritual growth in three areas. One is the desire realm, 欲界, dục giới. Form realm, 色界, sắc giới, and formless realm, 无色界, vô sắc giới. And then, actually there are four, and then liberation, 解脱, 解脱. So these four areas that one would have to go through, and not necessarily serially, but you can jump one and skip the other. But generally, these are the four areas that one would have to go through in terms of spiritual growth or spiritual development. So what is spiritual growth? Spiritual growth is essentially development of the consciousness. Right? 心识, tâm thức. And these are the four areas. So when one grows spiritually, one is developing one's consciousness wider and deeper. So the first level of to have independence, to grow spiritually, is actually in the realm of desire, our realm. 欲界, 欲giới. In this world, all sentient beings, 众生, chúng sanh, they all have 5 things in common. And what are those 5 things? Everyone in this realm of desire depends on 5 things. And those are wealth or material. The second is sex or affection, love. Third is fame or attention. Fourth is sustenance or nourishment, food or drinks. The fifth is sleep or rest. All the sentient beings in this world, they have different mixture of needs. Some don't care too much about material needs, but they place affection in high importance. Some people think that the secret to a happy and long life is in the food that one eats. And while others think that sleep or rest is the key to longevity and happiness. Right? So you can see that people place different importance in these 5 desires, but they have some desire for these 5 things, one way or another. When one realizes that the cost to secure these 5 desires outweigh the enjoyment of them, then one starts to become discontented or disenchanted, 厌离, 讲解. So to these 5 desires, they realize, I'm going to have to put so much effort in it to have fun, then you will realize that it is not worth it. That's when you have discontentment. So this word discontentment is what Sariputra experienced when they were at the festivals, and they realized that, hey, there was no longer fun in the festivals. So that's discontentment. 厌离, 讲解. So that was what the 2 friends, Apasita and Magali, realized. So after a couple of days of entertainment, at the festival, they felt empty and meaningless because the fun was fleeting, 无常, vô thường, right? Fleeting, one today's here, tomorrow gone. So even if you could live and have fun for 100 years, in the end, you will have to die, leaving this world in loneliness and or suffering. And so that's why they did not think that it was worth it. So they became discontented, 厌离, 讲解, and wanted deliverance from this world, 解脱, 解脱. Some people realize that ultimately, money cannot make them happy like it once did. Relationship cannot bring peace that they originally imagined. Fame and popularity bring them trouble and unwanted attention more often than not. And when they get old or sick, the food that they used to like no longer tastes good to them. They also realize that the more sleep they have, the more tired they become. In other words, chasing after these 5 desires, 五欲, 五有, can initially bring excitement and joy. But after a while, some people realize that it's very tiring. But even if you have achieved these 5 desires, 五欲, 五有, đại sắc danh thực thị, the excitement is fleeting. You have to go off again chasing more of it, and the tiredness continues increasingly. However, there are people who live their whole lives without having any kind of awareness of this. They go through life under the influence of culture and society, just like pre-programmed robots. So they just react to the data they receive through their senses. Whatever they see, they like. Whatever they see, they don't like. So if the input, the data coming in through the ears, the eyes, the tongues, is favorable, they are happy. If the input, the data coming in, is unfavorable, then they get upset. So continuing to create fresh karma, 造业, 导nghiệp, pushing the wheel of the samsara, the life cycle of life and death. So they keep going round and around. They keep going round and around, just like pre-programmed robots. So this is a good illustration here. So at conception, after conception, a baby is born, then a baby starts to grow up, goes to school, gets an education, has a career, has a family, right, and then gets old, gets weak and sick, and then RIP, rest in peace, right? So the cycle continues. The cycle continues. But there is a small percentage, a few number of people who start to ask, what's really behind the current of life? What's behind life? Is there anything more to life than just birth, old age, and death? There's got to be more, isn't it? So they become discontented, 厌离, 讲解, and they want to see what else is there that life has to offer. So there are people who don't want to give up the joy of the 5 desires, 五欲, 五有. They want something that lasts longer. So they want a better version of old age, illness, and death. They don't want to have old age, illness, and death. They just want to have the joy. Is it possible, they ask? Is it possible just to have the joy of the 5 desires without the baggage, without old age, illness, and death? That's where religion comes in. Some religions are able to offer them a heavenly life without giving up the 5 desires. In Buddhism, the heavens in our realm of desire can be divided into 6 levels. In the Digha Nikaya series, Kanaham, Hahanjing, there is a sutra called Sakka Panha Sutta, which captures a conversation between Sakka, the king of gods, the king of gods, Tenti, and the Buddha, where Sakka admitted the limitations of the heaven realm. So let's take a look at this, because this captures the conversations where Sakka asked the Buddha questions. So Sakka had come to visit the Buddha before, but because the Buddha was absorbed in meditation, he was sitting in meditation, and Sakka did not want to disturb the Buddha. So what he did was he asked one of his gods, Pansika. Pansika here, Pansika of Gandhabas, which is gods of music. Gandhava is gods of music. Their specialty is in music. They love music. So he asked Pansika, the god of music, to attract the Buddha's attention, and hoping that the Buddha would exit meditation, so Sakka himself would have an opportunity to ask the Buddha questions. So how did Pansika, the musician god, attract the Buddha's attention? What he did was he started to play a love song. The Buddha was sitting in a cave, so he didn't want to be too far. He didn't want to be too near, but just enough so that the Buddha could hear him. So he started playing a love song. So the sutra captures his entire song, his entire love song, but we'll go through only the main points. Okay, so this is what he said. He was in love with another goddess, but that goddess didn't like him back. So that's why he wrote this song. He said, "You who are the cause of my heart's delight, your radiant beauty is to me as dear as the Dhamma to an arhat." So Arahant, so arhats, Arahant, Alohan, love the Dhamma. So he loves her like arhats love Dhamma, the Dhamma. Thus, intent I seek your love. It's you I crave, my love for you so strong. So the Buddha, having heard this, he started to smile. So we know that this poem, or this song, was a mundane being, a fanfu. So we know that he loved somebody, but somebody did not love him back. So anyways, the Buddha heard this song and he starts to smile. So he exited his meditation. So we can see that it's not easy being a heaven being, right? There can still be disappointment in not getting what you want. So one thing that we can learn from this short passage is that a heaven life can be so blissful, so joyful, that they are not motivated to seek liberation from the cycle of life and death, but they are seeking their desire. Even though they can be near the Buddha, but instead of listening to the Dhamma, he created a love song. Right. And so the Buddha asked him, the Buddha complimented Pansika, say, your voice is very beautiful. Your instrument is also very beautiful. The voice and the sound instruments go very well together. So the Buddha, of course, complimented. And then the Buddha asked, when did you compose this love song? I just curious. That's when he said that at the time, I fell in love with the lady Bada, bright as the sun, the daughter of King Timbaru of the Gandhabas, musician gods. But the lady was in love with somebody else. And so when I found that I could not win the lady by any manner of means, that's when I started to create this song. So I sang the song to alleviate my pain. And Lord, having heard the verses, Lady Bada said to me, "Sir, I have not personally seen the blessed God," meaning the Buddha, "though I heard of him when I went to the Sahama hall of the 33 gods, to dance, to sing. And since, sir, you praise the blessed Lord so highly, let us meet today." So you can see that heavenly beings are submerged in the joy of having bliss, that they may have heard of the Buddha, but they have no interest in learning the Dhamma. So we can see that heavens can be a trap, and that will not let them out of the samsara easily. They are trapped in it. So samsara here means aimless wandering, meaning 轮回, so you keep going around and around endlessly. Now that the Buddha has exited his meditation and is talking to Pankasika, Sakka then takes the opportunity to come to ask the Buddha questions. Let's see what Sakka has to ask the Buddha. The Buddha also recognized that Sakka was very busy. He said that it's wonderful, marvelous. With so many things to do, that should you come here? And Sakka replied, "Lord, I have long wished to visit the blessed Lord, but I have always been so busy on behalf of the 33 gods that I was unable to come. So the Buddha acknowledges that Sakka, God, the God of gods, is extremely busy. Sakka admitted that life as the king of gods is not so easy. He is extremely busy on behalf of the gods. So one could infer that the gods often go to him for advice and consultation to resolve issues. Similar to life on earth, if you are rich and powerful, you will not have need any time for yourself. If you can see that the richest man in the world today has to work 100 hours at least a week. So depending on one's priority and work ethics, most people would not enjoy working 100 hours a week for the rest of their lives. So we see that many famous celebrities, luxurious mansions, but they don't get to enjoy them very much. They are always on the road, working, chasing after fame and fortune. So having heard from Sakka, life in heaven may not be as free and liberated as one might think. Next, Sakka asked the Buddha why there cannot be peace in this world, the realm of desire. So it's a very interesting conversation. He put the questions to the Buddha: by what feathers, sir, are beings bound, meaning gods, humans, asuras, nagas, gandhabas, and whatever other kinds there may be, all sentient beings in this world, whereby, although they wish to live without hate, harming, hostility, and in peace, they yet live in hate, harming one another, hostile and malignant. So people want to live in peace. The God asks, why is that people cannot have peace? Right? We have NATO, we have organization in this world trying to have world peace, but we have not been successful. So this question is very applicable to our lives. And this is the predicament that we're in. We want a peaceful life, but yet our lives are not peaceful. And so the King of Gods is asking the Buddha, why is that? So the Buddha replied, very interesting. He said, it is the bonds of jealousy and avarice that bind beings, so that though they wish to live without hate, they yet live in hate, harming one another, and hostility. They live in hostility. Right? So because of jealousy and avarice. So of course the Lord, the God is smart. He doesn't stop there. He asks, well, sir, what gives rise to jealousy? What's the origin? Why do people have jealousy? Why do people have avarice? Hatred one another. Then the Buddha says, it is because of having likes and dislikes. People like this, people don't like that. That's what's causing people to have jealousy and hatred. And Sakka continues to ask, well, sir, what gives rise to like and dislike? And the Buddha says, owing to the presence of desire, they arise. So we like, we dislike because of desire, right? Because of desire. Then Sakka asks, well, sir, what gives rise to desire? The Buddha continues to answer, he said, it is because of thinking. Now the author uses the word thinking, so it wasn't very clear to me, so I have to look into the Chinese version to understand what the translator or this author was trying to say. So it turns out that it's not just thinking, but it's intention. Because of intentions that you have desire. Because of desire that you have like and dislike, you have preferences. Because of preferences, like and dislike, you have jealousy. When people have more than you have, you hate them. You're jealous of them. So it's intention, our intention. 意muốn, 意欲, right? And then so Sakka continues to ask, well, sir, what gives rise to thinking or intention? The Buddha says it is because of tendency to proliferation. Now I had no idea what the author was talking about. So I had to go back to the Chinese version to understand what the author was trying to say. And it is, so tendency to proliferation is nothing other than false wandering thoughts. 妄想, 妄tưởng. So because of wandering thoughts that we have thinking, Because of thinking that we have desire. Because of desire that we have likes and dislike. And because of that we have jealousy. And because of jealousy, we can never live in peace. Right? And so Sakka continues to ask, well, what can one do to not have wandering thoughts? This is a very important question because we, as we study the Pure Land, we are often taught of not to have wandering thoughts, right? 没有妄想, không có vọng tưởng. So this is very applicable to our practice, and we will look into how is it that one cannot have wandering thoughts. How can one not have 妄想, vọng tưởng? How can one avoid false wandering thoughts? And this is what the Buddha explains to him. So Sakka asks, what can one do to not have wandering thoughts, to stop, to have the cessation of the tendency for liberation? So what can one do? The Buddha says that I declare that there are two types of happiness. One kind is to be pursued, the other kind is to be avoided. Anything, the pursuit of such happiness, unwholesome factors, meaning unwholesome here meaning 不善, bất thiện pháp, 不善法 is unwholesome. Decrease, and wholesome, 善法, thiện pháp, increases, then one should pursue it. So anything that we do, if it's going to lead to wholesomeness, 善法, thiện pháp, then we should pursue, we should do. Anything that leads to unwholesomeness, 不善法, 不thiện pháp, then we should avoid. This helps to stop the tendency for liberation. This will help us to avoid wandering thoughts, 妄想vọng tưởng. So the Buddha is not saying don't stop thinking, suppress your thoughts. The Buddha is not saying that. But normally people think that to not have wandering thoughts, you just stop thinking. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to utilize your body, your speech, and your mind towards wholesomeness, skillfulness, 善法, thiện pháp. That's how you stop wandering thoughts. It's not by stopping yourself, forcing yourself not to think. So the Buddha is teaching us that. So then what practice then? How do we practice to restrain ourselves so that we can have skillfulness, thiện pháp, 善法? And that's what the Buddha says here with bodily conduct, as well as oral conduct and mental conduct. We not only that we are using our minds we should never use our minds to force our thinking, because you are suppressing your thoughts. That is not very good. When you suppress your thoughts, you suppress your emotions. When you suppress your emotions, one day, what's going to happen? It will explode, right? If you are not expressing yourself, you keep that anger inside you. One day, you will explode. You may be able to contain it, but over time, when you cannot contain it anymore, and a little incident could blow up into a big matter, right? That's because one is suppressing one's feelings and emotions. So the Buddha is not teaching us to get rid of our wandering thoughts by suppressing our thoughts, but to do good deeds. Use the body to do good deeds, to serve other people, to be helpful. Use our speech to have kind words towards others. Use our minds to think skillful thoughts. That's how we overcome wandering thoughts. Does it make sense? This is very important. This hopefully helps to answer a lot of questions of what am I to do with my wandering thoughts? Right? You don't suppress your thoughts, but you go out and you cultivate merits, 修福, 度福, right? That's what the Buddha is teaching us. It's not to stay at home and to stop thinking, to stop associating with the rest of the world, that you can eliminate your wandering thoughts. No, it doesn't work that way. Because again, the more that you suppress, the more that you have pressure built in you, and eventually it will blow up, right? So the best thing is to express yourself, to go out and help people, to say good speech, right? And to think good thoughts, skillful thoughts. Saka asks, well, what can I do to really help me? What does it mean to do good deeds, to have a good conduct? So essentially, that's what the Buddha is saying, is to observe the precepts, 持戒, 止giới. And so Saka is asking, well, how do I do that? How do I observe the precepts? Easier said than done, right? So what does it mean to observe the precepts? 持戒, 止giới. And this is what the Buddha is telling us, or teaching Saka, but the Buddha is also teaching us because we want to know. The Buddha says that if its pursuit leads to the decrease of unwholesome factors and the increase of wholesome ones, such an object is to be sought after. After the same applies with the eyes, right? When we see something, whatever we see, it should lead to wholesomeness, 善法, 听法. Whatever that we hear, it should lead to the increase in our 善法, 听法, skillfulness. Whatever we taste, when we eat something, it should lead to 善法, 听法, skillfulness. What this means is that whatever that we do, it should lead in an increase in our merits. Phước đức, right? Trí tuệ. Whatever 智慧, 福德. Whatever that we do, it should increase our merits. 福德, 福đức. So that's what the Buddha is saying, that the same applies to things perceived by the ears, what we hear, by the nose, what we smell, by the tongues, what we taste, by the body, what we feel, and the mind, what we think. So the things that we take in should lead to skillfulness, 善法, 听法. That's what the Buddha is saying. So how do you observe the precepts? The Buddha is saying that when you interact with the world, when you see, when you hear, when you smell, when you taste, those things need to lead to skillfulness, 善法, 听法, right? So that's how one observes the precepts. So let's summarize this part here. When you have the senses, 六根, 六根, interact with objects, 六尘, 六证, then we have sense consciousness, 识, 六识, right? 六thức. So wholesomeness here again is 善法, 听法. So our speech, our action, from our speech, it leads to action. And if we don't control that, it leads to false wandering thoughts. And it leads to thinking or intention. That leads to desire. And then we will have like or dislike. And eventually it will lead to jealousy and avarice. And then even if we want to live without suffering, without hostility, without hatred, we cannot. Right? So wanting to live without hate, harming, hostility, peace, but cannot because of jealousy and avarice. So we want to live in a peaceful world, but we don't know how to control our senses. And people don't have awareness of this, right? And therefore, you have a group of people coming in wanting to have world peace, but they argue with each other. So then that doesn't make sense at all. They still have jealousy. They still have like and dislike. They still have the desire, the intention for them to be better. So therefore, the world can never have peace. And so even up to so that's what Saka, the God of gods, looking down his realm and looking down the whole world. And that's what he sees, right? He sees like, it's so strange. People want to live happily with one another. People want to have a peaceful life. But how is it that they cannot live a peaceful life? Of all the thousands of years, I think since the beginning of time, that people want to live a happy life, but we have never seen a happy life, very happy and happiness and peace on earth. And that is, the Buddha is teaching us down to the core. Whatever we see, whatever we taste, we hear, it is because it leads to unwholesomeness. 不善法, 不听法. That is why That's the cause of why we don't have world peace. So even if we don't like this world, we go up to the heaven, we cannot escape. And so that's is part of spiritual development is, okay, fine, we can leave this world. Some religion would say, oh, go to heaven. Heaven is the perfect life. But we see that the God of gods is saying, not necessarily so. You will still have mental afflictions, 烦恼, phiền não, even in the heavens, right? So that is at least the first step in spiritual development. So we're coming to the end here, but let me summarize and then we'll close. Okay, so we see that in this scenario. Oh, and also there are five signs of the devil's imminent death. That they still have to die. Their flowers, the garlands, wither, get dry. Their clothes get soiled. They sweat, and then they're no longer luster. They're no longer shining, and that they don't sit very easily in the seat. So those are signs that they are about to die. So we can see, let's summarize and then we conclude. We can see that the heaven can be so blissful that they don't want to leave the samsara, the cycle of life and death, let alone learning the Dhamma and to seek for spiritual liberation, as in the case of Lady Bada, the object of desire of Pansika, the god of music, and many other devils. They don't want to leave the heavenly world, so they get trapped. The second thing, there's more to this, but so the second thing here is that life in the heaven can be extremely busy, dealing with worldly and heavenly affairs, and they have no time to learn the Dharma, as in the case of Saka himself. So don't believe anybody telling you that, yeah, you go to heaven and you're free forever. No, Saka is telling us you're going to be even busier than before. Some people who they wish they can retire early so that they can have free time, but then they realize that they are even busier when they retired. So this is not very far from the truth. In the heaven, you can even be busier than you are now. So don't be foolish to try to go to heaven. The third thing is that heavenly life can lead to disappointment, as in the case of Pansika, the musician god who loved goddess, but he was not able to get her. As we progress in this spiritual development, we realize that the sensuous realm, 欲界, 欲giới, is not very completely satisfactory. Right? So we should understand the full picture so that we don't mislead ourselves, thinking that heaven will resolve all of our problems, but it's not. So, but there is still more that we can learn and grow, and we can achieve that state of complete liberation, 解脱, 解脱. But we have to grow and to go through that development. So next time when we meet, we will talk about what is the rest of that development. Okay? And then we'll come back to Sariputra in his life. We took off of tangent to talk about this because it's so important. This contentment, 厌离, 盈离, 讲解, is not a negative thing, but you have to leave behind what you don't want in order to go towards what you want, right? So that this contentment is very important in spiritual development. It is a very positive thing. You will find something brighter, more positive, because what you're looking for is wholesomeness, 善法, 停法, is not the other, where it leads to suffering. So the more that you grow, the more happiness, the more freedom you will encounter, right? That is why it is very positive, right? Okay. So we have to be courageous enough to leave behind what is no longer supporting our needs, and yet still be courageous enough to pursue wholesomeness, 善法, 停法, that can support our needs.